Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I just want to hang out for a little while and sketch and show you how I go about sketching such a page like this here. So in this case this is from a recent hike that we did, and I encountered lots of different birds and other interesting things. This old farm you can see, and some mushrooms and snails and lots of stuff like this. So what I usually start with is pencil sketches, and you can see some photos here that I took while I was on my hike so that I could recreate my sketch a little bit better when I was back at home. Sometimes I start with my sketches while I'm on the road, but this time I just knew that I wouldn't have the time for this, and I started back in the studio. So this is the snail that you just saw. As you can see, I'm starting with the basic shapes, and I'm speeding the whole video up a little bit so that we don't spend the entire time watching me make decisions in real time, because that would be probably a bit too long. I'm afraid this video will be quite long anyway. So as you can see, I'm starting with the basic shapes, the outlines, and then I'm adding a few of these very subtle lines and textures, and most of them in places where I want the viewer to look at. So I'm not trying to add texture everywhere, but just in the most important places. And these snails, they're not the most difficult shape to draw. So I'm refining and emphasizing the lines that I want to be a little bit darker. I believe this is a HB pencil, but I could be wrong. Adding a little bit of shadow here and there. And there you go, I think that's a finished sketch. So now I want to sketch this farmhouse, and I've decided for a sort of landscape view like this. I want to put this somewhere central because it was quite central on our hike. So I'm starting to lay in the rough shapes for this. So usually when I decide really spontaneously on the layout for these kind of pages, and sometimes just making up as I go. But usually for these kind of small landscapes, I want them to be in the middle of the page. As you can see here, it's okay to go over the spread, over this middle part of the page, because, it's just a sketch. And the next thing that I want to sketch on this page is something that I found really fascinating. So we encountered these birds, these starlings. There were quite a lot of them. They were really loud. They were all sitting in this big tree right next to the farm building. And then suddenly they took off, and then they landed on the field and just flew back and forth. And I find this to be really fascinating. I mean, look at these patterns. It's so beautiful. And I wanted to sketch this somehow. And my idea is here to sketch different phases of this swarm, different shapes. So if at all possible, I want to show the movement that this swarm makes. And for now, I'm just doing very rough pencil sketch. I will refine this in ink later, I think. Ink will be a nice medium for this. And when sketching something like this, obviously You need to be very fast if you're sketching this from life. And I found having this video where I could pause was something that was really valuable. Taking a few notes. And then there were some ravens. Unfortunately, I don't have video footage of that, or not very much. There they are, just taking off, playing a little bit in the air. And yeah, I wanted to include a raven, because in the area where I have been hiking in the last few months, we have a lot of ravens here, and it's been really great watching them and listening to them. And they have such interesting and articulate voices. So this is my quick sketch of a raven in flight. And again, I'm sticking to the basic forms here. Since this is a black bird, there's not really that much to see of a different colors or wing structure or something like that. And I'm probably adding too much detail already. I know how the feathers are arranged, so I'm drawing this in, but this was definitely not what I saw when I looked at these birds from the ground. And of course I will add another layer of paint later when I come back to all of these things. So the way that I usually work is I make pencil sketches in the first stage. And here's the next subject. This is a mushroom. It's actually edible. I didn't take it with me, but these taste really nice. There were a few of them that were already gone. So these are too far in their life cycle to be eaten. But I usually start filling the entire page with pencil sketches. So I plan out my layout like this, and as a second step I will then add color to either all of the sketches or to only some of them. And in this case I added ink in a few places, and the rest I painted over with watercolor. So I know that for this one I will need a little bit of a darker background because it's a white mushroom, or mostly white, and it's always a bit hard to see. Here you can see additional footage of me walking down the valley. There's the farmhouse. It was really an idyllic place. This is a red kite. I didn't manage to get footage for this one, but I thought I'd add a photo so that you can see what kind of bird I'm sketching now. So these are really common bird of prey here. I've decided a few weeks ago that I eventually will have to learn how these birds of prey, how I can tell them apart. So this is what I have planned for the autumn, for the winter, or maybe just for the next year, to learn about more about the silhouettes of my local birds of prey here, so that I can tell them apart a little bit better. You know, I'm quite good with songbirds, but with birds of prey they just all look the same to me. And this particular one, this red kite, has a very distinct tail shape. So now here's our next bird. It's a crested tit. Again, I didn't get good photo of this, so I'm showing you what this little bird looks like. They're really adorable little fellas, quite mobile and quite loud actually. So, and also, of course, it has this punk look. So I've reserved this spot in the right corner for this little bird. And I'm just doing a quick sketch of the main features here. So I'm reserving a bit of space for my notes, for my text. And I'm adding the areas around the head where I know I will place a little bit more emphasis, a little bit more textural detail. So here's how my entire page looks in this pencil stage. And now I'm bringing out the watercolors, spraying them with a little bit of water to activate them. And the first thing that I want to do is paint this pale yellow for the snail's body. So this isn't an intense color, so I probably won't have to add too many layers to this. And interestingly enough, some parts of this snail around the face looked actually blue. So I'm including this. Something you can't even see that well on the photo here. Now I'm adding these stripes on the house, on the shell. I don't know, do you call this a snail house? Because in German we say that this is the house of the snail, but I guess it's like a shell. So there are very delicate color variants that I want to include here. I don't want to make this too dark, but I still want to have all these different colors, these soft pinks and blues and grays. Adding a little bit of shadow on the body of the snail. And I find this is a little bit too much texture, so I will dab it off with my painting rag. And now I'm going to refine the lines on the shell. There you can see me adding a little bit of the blue. I'm softening a few of these lines again because I don't want any harsh contrasts, and I'm coming in with colored pencil to add a few more distinct colors. Now I'm getting out my dip nib pen and I'm adding a little bit of text. So this is the name of the snail. And I'm adding the Latin name too in another color. So this is very nice ink that I like to use. It's drawing ink and it's waterproof when it's dry, so you can actually go over it with watercolor if you want. And I will do this later for the title. Now we have the starlings. I'll show you again this video because I just think this is so beautiful. And they were really flying back and forth between the tree and the field quite a few times, so we watched them for quite a while. And as for these individual starlings, I will just add small dots. I could probably have taken a brush here for bigger dots, but this is what I decided on, so this will take me a while. I've added a slow-mo video in the left corner for you so that you can watch the movement of the swarm. So I'm adding more dots, more markings in the areas where I want the weight, so to speak, where I want the dark areas to be, and this implies the movement that I can see. And it's really interesting that these animals take off together, and then one of them or a few of them are sort of like the leaders, so they lead the group into a certain direction and back, and yeah, it's just this kind of group intelligence or group behavior that I find so fascinating. Put down a little bit too much ink there, so I'm taking it up with a brush. And I think this looks okay, so it gets the idea across. So next is my little landscape painting. Well, it's almost like an architectural study, right? But I'm thinking of it more as a landscape study. So we have the roof of the house, the farm building, and I'm mixing burnt sienna and a little bit of orange to make it pop a little bit more. And I'm painting in the side of a roof slightly lighter because it gets a bit more light. As you can see, it also has a lighter color, so I want to reflect that in my sketch. Adding a bit more darkness under the roof where the shadow is. And now I'm coming in with this raw sienna and white mix for the building shape. And I'm adding a bit of, I think this was raw umber, to give it a little bit of structure. Now I'm adding the trees with my, I believe this is sap green, and then I'm always adding a little bit of a red or a brown to take back some of the intensity of these greens. So these pre-mixed greens sometimes are a little bit too intense for me. And to make them look natural, you have to add a little bit of the complementary color. So this would be red, or red browns always do a good job. Then this is the background, a hill, a distant hill, and then a tree that I want to appear in the background, so it's very light. Adding the dark spots, the doors and windows, and again this shadow under the roof. And we already have a working scene, I would say. So I just need to add a little bit of the ground, and here are a few structural details. I think they're a little bit too dark. I'll probably take some of these away again. And I'm using, as I like to do, quite the big brush. with a fine tip, so this gives me fine lines, and I can also cover large areas of color. You can see I'm adding more and more of these structures and textures, and in the end I think this was all a little bit too much. I think it looked better before I did this, but well, there you go. When you're in the process of sketching, it's always so much fun, and you have to restrain yourself so much from adding more and more stuff. So there's the sky, just a few clouds. They were quite dark. It wasn't a sunny day. You can see I'm removing a bit of the detail again here. Now there are the ravens again. And I'm adding just a dark wash to my raven in flight here. So this should be an easy one, because I don't have to think about anything else besides filling out that shape. So at the edge of the wing you can see the individual feathers. I'm painting this in with my brush. And here you can see it pays off a little bit if you know how the feathers are arranged on the bird. So I'm able to paint this in with a bit more confidence, because I know how they spread out, how they are arranged. Okay, and that's basically it. And just once it's dry, a little bit of colored pencil. That you almost can't see. It's a very dark violet. And onto the next subject here. So I'm going from left to right, and now I'm doing this little white mushroom. And the first thing that I'm doing is actually adding some darker color around the mushroom so that the white will have a better contrast against the colored background. And this is a very neat trick that you can do for all kinds of white subjects, like flower heads, butterflies, birds. It really helps these light subjects stand out. On the right side there's a slight shadow, and at the base of the mushroom you can see it gets really, really dark. So I want to reflect that. And I'm adding these dark inky spots. So in German this one is actually called, well, it could be translated like something like inkhead. And when it falls apart, like in the photos that I've shown in the beginning, it actually really looks and feels like ink. So it's this dark fluid stuff that comes out of the mushroom. So I'm adding a bit more shadow over my texture. And that's everything that I want to do in this sketch. So not really complicated. Adding the name and the Latin name. And now I'm doing my red kite. So I didn't have a reference for this one, so I did it from memory, and I think I sort of butchered the bird a little bit, so the body is too long. I looked at a few reference photos later, and well, I could have done a better job on this, but sometimes this is all that you have to work with, and then you'll just have to go with it. I think the key elements of the bird are in the sketch, though. So the sharp tail, or this almost swallow-like tail, and then the dark wingtips that I've just added. And one thing that's a bit more prominent usually in the silhouette is that right next to the wingtips there's this area that's white. And I filled this up with a little bit of color because that's what I remembered, but that's actually wrong. So there are these really light patches next to the wingtips, so in the middle part of the wing, when you see it in flight above. And I'm adding in quite a bit of color. At this point I wasn't really sure where the red part at the center of the bird was stopping, but I decided to just leave it like that. So it looks like it has ruffled feathers, but that's okay. I'm adding the name with my 2 kinds of ink. And now we go for the fun part, the little crested tit. So I'm adding in the light body first, so the belly color, this light buff tone. And then I'm adding the darker brown of the tail and the wings. You can see I'm dropping in a few colors. So this is probably a mix of burnt umber and sepia, something like that. I'm adding in the eye with Payne's gray and the dark throat and the markings around the face. So this bird has this sort of band around its ear patch and around the neck, and then these funny dark spots on the crested part of his head. So it's a really cute bird. So I'm working on the face a lot right now because that's where I want the most detail to be. And for the rest of the body, I'll only add in what I absolutely need to make sense of the rest of the posture. You can see a few feathers here. So I want to show that on the wing the feathers are stacked, but I don't want to show individual feathers. I'd rather have people look at the area around the eye. I'm making the dark spots a little bit darker. And adding a bit of shadow around the feet and around the wing. And you can see me tap away most of the shadow that I've just painted. I don't want to be this too dark, because it's a very delicate shadow and a very delicate bird. So this is the finished page. As you can see, the last thing that I'll add is this colorful splash around my title and a little bit of white. So the highlights are the last part that I'll add. I thought that this snail house needed a little touch of white highlight. And there are the white areas of the red kite. And that's basically the finished sketch. So I hope this was fun for you to watch. I hope this was useful. So this is how I usually go about sketching such a page. So I don't plan everything to the last detail. I focus on the subjects that I want to include. So I look at the photos that I have at the reference, and then I imagine, well, I maybe want a central part with a landscape, and then arrange some of the other subjects around it. It's always a good idea to have birds that are flying, so these bird silhouettes somewhere up in the air. And then also you can do a lot of the layout. You can sort of shape your layout with the notes that you take next to the paintings or the sketches. And so this is another element of composition that you can make really good use of. Yeah, so all in all, I hope this was a useful video demonstration for you. I hope you liked the video. And yeah, feel free to give me a like for this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. And in any case, thank you for watching. I'll see you very soon, and until then, happy sketching.